Hello, welcome back to the App and Game Development LOOC. My name is Peter Bereznai and I am the other instructor of this course together with Ben Geisler. In the welcome video, I'm the person on the right sitting there with Ben. So welcome again. Let's get started. We are in Unit 2. And in this segment, we are going to take a look at how to write C# programs or applications. As Ben explained earlier, in the first part of the LOOC, in the game development part, we are going to use the C# programming language as the language in which we write program code for the games that we are going to develop. The tool that we use is Visual C# Express 2010, which can be started from its install directory, or alternatively, as I did, I already placed a shortcut for it in my taskbar, and we can start faster from that location. So let's get started. The type of program that we are going to look first is the simplest type. We can write a so-called console application type program, in which case the input and output of the program appears in the so-called console window or command prompt. The command prompt can be started either from accessories and command prompt, and this is what it looks like, or a little faster by going into the run box and simply typing cmd, stands for command, that starts the cmd.exe, which is the command prompt application, and that starts out the command window. So the console window. So the console window or command prompt will be the place where our input and output will happen. So moving along, let's look at the first program that we are going to write, which simply displays a single line of text in the console window. The code is seen here, a text displaying application, and its output will be welcome to C# programming, shown there. Here is the code of it, and it is very simple, and it is also known as a hello world type of program, because it's almost a tradition in programming that when someone first starts learning a new programming language, then the first program that they write is a hello world application, and that's exactly, of course, what Ben did when he showed the game development environment XNA Studio, kind of a hello world game, if we can call that a game. So moving along here, we are going to write this application that displays a single line of text. There are a few concepts that we need to be aware of. Many of you might have seen similar concepts perhaps in other programming languages. One of them is that programmers insert comments to document applications that improve the readability of code, and these are reminders for ourselves for later, as well as information for other programmers who look at our code to indicate what's going on inside the code. The compiler itself that turns our source code into a binary executable ignores these comments, so they have no effect on the running of the program. And there are two kinds of these comments. One of them is a single line comment, and that's indicated by a double slash, so two slash characters, as opposed to the limited comments, which contain multiple lines of text, and they are indicated by a slash followed by an asterisk character to show where it begins, and then asterisk followed by a slash in the opposite order to show where the comment ends, and all the text between these delimiters is ignored by the compiler. If we make mistakes with either comments or in any other way, the compiler, the program that creates binary executables from our source code, will indicate so, and won't complete, will crash and send an error message. Such a situation is called a compile error, or compiler error, or compile time error, or compilation error. And actually this is the good kind of error, because that indicates a syntax error. In other words, we type something wrong that does not conform with the rules of the given programming language that we are using. A more problematic case is when the syntax is correct. In other words, we are formally conforming with the rules of the language, but we are making some kind of a logical error. And in that case, the compiler will not indicate that there's an error, and it will happen only during runtime. So when we are running the program, or worse, when we write a program for as a user runs it, and during the running of the program there's a crash, and those are the bad kind of errors that we like to avoid, and of course those can be avoided only by careful debugging and testing. When we write a program, even as simple a program like displaying a line of text, there are a few elements that go in it. One of them is directives, and the most common is the using directive that tells the compiler where to find certain predefined classes that are used in our program. These are organized in so-called namespaces, and the actual namespace name follows the using directive. And the .NET namespaces are referred as the .NET Framework Class Library. One of the most important such namespaces is the system namespace that contains, among others, the predefined console class, which we are going to use in a console program. If we forget to use the right directive, or the using directive with the right namespace, then the compiler won't recognize some of our code and will send a message that it does not exist in the current context, in which case we have to double check that we have the right using directives in place. When writing programs, we place blank lines or empty spaces in the program text. We indent, in other words, we move the beginnings of the lines further inwards to the right, and this kind of white spaces, as they are known, blank line and spaces, are ignored by the compiler, but their purpose is to make our code more readable, easier to read by humans, ourselves later, or fellow programmers, and so on. Most programs consist of a collection of keywords or reserved words that are specific words that indicate to the compiler of what kind of action to take, and these words are called reserved because they cannot be used for any other purpose. In particular, they cannot be used as identifiers of variables, classes, methods, and so on, anything that programmers create. Every application has at least one class declaration, a main class declaration, and that's a user-defined class as opposed to the predefined classes that are in the .NET Framework Class Library. The class keyword indicates that a new class is created, followed by the class name. We'll look at classes, objects, and related object-oriented concepts in a later segment. For now, the only thing we need to remember that there's always a main class whose name typically is the same as the program we are writing. So it starts with a capital letter, and subsequent words in the identifier are also capitalized by convention. A class name is an identifier, and identifiers occur everywhere in programming, for variables, for method names, functions names, and so on. A class name is an identifier too, and identifiers have certain rules. They consist of letters, numerical digits, and underscores, but no other characters, and they cannot begin with a numerical digit, and of course they cannot contain spaces, because then they wouldn't be interpreted as a single identifier rather than two separate ones. As mentioned earlier, keywords cannot be used as identifiers, and here is the list of keywords used in C# and some more, and these can be used for their original purpose, cannot be used as identifier names. Another important aspect of creating identifier names is that C# is case sensitive, so uppercase and lowercase letters are different, and therefore two identifiers, even if otherwise identical, and the only difference between them is the capitalization, will be treated as two separate identifiers, not the same. So we have to always remember that. In case we want to use for some reason a reserve word or a keyword as part of an identifier, that can be done, but it has to be preceded by the ampersand character so that it does not get confused with a keyword. When an application has a single class and a public class, as discussed later, should be saved by programming convention, should be saved in a file that has the same name with the .cs extension. The .cs extension is an indication that the file in question contains C# source code, or the code of a C# program. When we write code, we use two important characters, the left brace and the right brace, which indicate the body of of code, or a block of code, and these blocks of code make up the contents of a class, the body of a class, or constructs such as loops or conditional statements, and so on. In general, the left and right brace enclose blocks of code that belong together, and it wouldn't make sense taken separately. Generally, it's recommended that we indent these blocks of code, so anything that is a separate blocks is moved a little bit to the right within our source code file, so that the structure of the code is easier to see and read. This kind of formatting applies kind of recursively, because blocks of code can be nested, placed within each other, and the IDE, the integrated development environment, in our case Visual C#, allows us to format these blocks to our liking, and there is an edit advanced format document option where we can specify what kind of indentation we want, and we can so that this convention uniformly applies, and the tab key can be used to achieve such indentation. We are going to use 3 spaces for each level of indentation in this course. It's again important that the left and right braces form a block of code indicating the beginning and end of it, and leaving out either one causes a syntax error or a compile error, and we have to be mindful that they come in matching pairs. Round parentheses are also important and also come in matching pairs, and they are an indication that a particular block of code is a method. A class can have one or more methods. Same capitalization rules and convention apply as for class names. And for every application, it has to be at least one class that calls a method called main with a capital M. Otherwise, the program won't run. And generally, the execution of the program begins with the first command or the first statement in the main method. They perform tasks, and they can return information. If we write a method where we do not intend to return any specific information, we use the void keyword to indicate that there's no return value. And the body of a method, just like the body of a class, is a code block surrounded by left and right braces. And the indentation indicates the structure of these. Since in our first application we are going to display a line of text, we have to talk about how we create and display text. Generally, we write the text as a typed amount of text placed between double quotation marks or double quotes. They can contain whitespace characters such as spaces and new lines, but they are not ignored by the compiler. And when we want to display them, then the console object's writeLine method will display the text in the console window. In addition to it, the writeLine also will place a new line or enter character at the end of the output. The string itself, which is again text in double quotation marks, is passed as an argument to the writeLine method, and therefore it will be in the round parentheses, and then the output will appear in the console window. Such a single step of performing a task is called a statement or a command, and generally they are terminated by semicolons so that the compiler is in the clear about where one command ends or statement and where the next one starts. It is useful to number the lines so that if there is an error in one of our command lines, we can easily identify that. So, now that we discussed these details, we can move on to create our first console application. To do so, we have to go to File, New Project to see the New Project dialog box, and then select the console application type and give it a name such as Welcome 1, and hit OK to create the project. This is how it will look like when we create it. So to get started, I need to start up my Visual C# Express 2010 IDE right here. Takes a few seconds to come up, assuming that I actually started it here. Takes a few seconds to start up, and when it got started, it will actually show the main window, and within it sub windows, the Solution Explorer and the Properties windows. So moving on, we have to create a new project. So One more thing about the Solution Explorer and the Properties windows is that the Solution Explorer will contain the various components of our programs, and the Properties window will contain various properties associated with the various components. If you close or minimize or lose these windows, you can always reopen them under View under View, Other Windows, and Properties window, and Solution Explorer, Control WP and Control WS right there, and they will come back. So to start a new project, we have to go to File, New Project, which is same as the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-N, and selecting that, the new project window comes up. In Visual C# we can create various different kind of applications. The one we are going to create will be the console application. We need to give it a name, so in our case we'll choose the name Welcome 1, and once that's done we can hit the OK button, and it will create the new project. When done, the Solution Explorer shows various components of it, including a file whose name is program.cs. So its name is the same as the class that is included in it, and the properties of it are shown. Also the file is open in the main edit window, and the short text of our first program is visible in there. The ID, the integrated development environment, is applying syntax color shading or syntax highlighting so that we can visually see the different elements, keywords, identifier, comments, and so on. So that is useful. For example, keywords are shown in blue, comments will be green, and so on. So here is a look at the layout, and one useful thing to do is number our program lines. Mine is actually numbered already, and this is done by the Tools Options menus. We have to go to Show Setting, Text Editor, All Languages, and check the line numbers. So in our case we have to go to Tools and Options, and within it I collapse this environment aspect and go to Text Editor and All Languages, and then we see a checkbox down here for line numbers, and that's the one we want to check, so that our command lines are numbered. So in our case it's already there, 1 through 14, 15. So if we have an error somewhere, then we can easily identify it by its line number. The other useful thing to do is to deal with tabs. Generally we go to All Languages tabs, and we are going to use 3 spaces for tabbing. We also checked insert spaces so that actual spaces are inserted and maybe block style of indentation. And then we can hit OK. So here is the line number settings, and also how to do the tab size setting. We are selecting insert spaces and 3 for both the tab size and the indent size fields, and OK to save our settings. If for some reason we want to change the file name, we can do so in the Properties window. So in our case, here is the program file, program.cs, and the program file name is down there in the properties window. We are going to change it to welcome 1. So here we can change that to welcome 1.cs. And we see how the file name changed to welcome 1, and the class name with it as well changed to welcome 1. When we write our code, there will be a feature that is very helpful called IntelliSense, that lists the class members and methods as well as the possible arguments that can be passed to the methods, and it will highlight the first member and lists all the other possible overloaded uses of a method. We can either type the name or double click or press the tab key to complete the name, and the control key makes the window transparent so we can see the code behind it. So here is an example: console followed by the IntelliSense drop-down window, which shows a tooltip that describes the highlighted item, and there's a large number of highlighted items, and when it's partially typed, it has an autocomplete feature that it can identify what possible commands have that particular partially typed name. For example, if you write write, there is a write command and there's a write line command of the console object. And then when we go to arguments, then a parameter info window is displayed about the method's parameters, and up and down arrows allow to scroll through the overloaded versions as shown here, like 19 different versions. So going back to our application, we want to add the new line to it, so hitting enter opens a new line, then the tab key will tab back in 3 spaces, and then we can start typing like console partially shown, and we can just hit the tab key to finish it, and then dot to find the methods, and again we can write partially, and there are the options, and we can use the down key to go down to the one we want. There is information about it as well as its overloads, and then the tab key completes it, and now we can open a round parenthesis to see what kind of information we want to pass in as an argument. There are 19 different ways. One of them is string, so we can just type the string we like to display. In this case, welcome to C# programming. And when we are done with the text, we shouldn't forget the closing double quote so that it's complete, and when that's done, we shouldn't forget to close the round parenthesis. We often see a kind of red wiggly line that indicates that something is incomplete or wrong, so we have to complete the round parenthesis, and then to end the command, we have to place a semicolon. The wiggly lines are gone, which means that our code is correct. Now it's time to save the project. Under File, Save All, we will select a location for it and create a directory for the solution and hit Save. So we have to go to File and then down to Save All or Ctrl-Shift-S, and a dialog comes up, in which case the name of the project is indicated, the location, in my case whatever I used last, that directory that can be changed by the browse button. If we click the browse button, we get a window to find paths, find folders and locations if we want to change that, but in my case it's correct. And then the solution name, and we can click the create directory for the solution option and hit save. This will save our application, and that's always important to remember because it's easy to lose large amount of work if you don't save often enough. So generally I would recommend that when you are programming, then save often and save a lot. In general, if you wrote just a few commands or even just a line or two, it's a good idea to hit that Ctrl S or Ctrl Shift S to save everything, because if something bad happens, which can be as simple as, in case of a desktop without a battery, a power outage, and suddenly it blacks out, the screen blacks out, everything is gone. And if you've been writing code for an hour and a half at a time and never saved, then you might lose dozens of lines or hundreds of lines of code and hours of work in a split second, and that can be very frustrating. So generally I recommend that you save often and save a lot so that you don't risk losing your work. So saving is very important. Once we saved our application, it's time to compile and run it. Compiling is the process of converting our source code, which is just a text file or a flat ASCII file, and as such it can be read even as simple a tool as Notepad, and as such is not directly executable. So it needs compilation, and a compiler does the job of converting our source code into a binary executable code. In other words, creating from the source file, which has the extension .cs, and creating a new file out of it that has the extension .exe, and .exe in Windows is the name of a binary executable file. In our case, we do this by going to debug and build solution, or F6. And if we get build succeeded down in the lower left corner and don't get an errors window, that means that we had no error in our code. Let me try to introduce an artificial error just to show what happens when we make an error. So for example, let's say that I mistyped console and left the right the E at the end of the word. Of course it's red wiggly underlined, but suppose I don't notice it, and I now want to rebuild the solution, then it won't go as easy. In fact, I will get an error list and in our error window, and it will even indicate in the line where the error occurs in line 12, and if I double click this, it will jump straight where the error is, and then I recognize that that should really say console with an E at the end. So now that I corrected it, I can close my error list. Again, save all. You can also do either Ctrl S for just this file or Ctrl Shift S for all files, or use the save all icon and then try again. So build solution, and this time it's successful. So errors happen, mistakes happen, and then we have to do some debugging if that's the case. Once we successfully compiled, we have to run it. That's really a form of debugging, and generally we can go to debug and start without debugging, which is the same as Control F5, that will run the program, and it will invoke actually the main method and start the execution with the first, and in our case only, command or statement of the main method, which is displaying a line. And it should look like that. So let's go back to F#. So again, under debug, F5 would be start debugging, which is the same as this VCR type of button of playing, but if we want to do it without, then we can hit Control F5 on the keyboard, and then it will run, saying welcome to C# programming, and we can hit any key to continue. On my keyboard I'm hitting the space bar, and that terminates the running of the program. So phew, this was our first program, and our first Hello World program successfully written. We can also run it from the command prompt. We can go to the command prompt and change to the directory where the exe file is, like that, and just write its name, in this case welcome1. And it also indicates where it can be found, welcome1/bin/release. So in my case, the directory I would need to change to would be in my own directory, and under in my own machine, in my own directory, under my own documents, and under Cursor. If I go to Game and App LOOC and LOOC projects, so this is where my welcome project is placed, and if I go into it, welcome1 has a bin folder, within it a release folder, and there is the welcome1 exe. If I am in Windows Explorer, I could just run it again, but this time it won't say hit a key to continue because I'm not debugging it. And if I go to this directory indicated up here, it's pretty long, in the command prompt, and I just type welcome1, then again the program will run just like with Control F5. So that's the end of this segment, and I'll see you in the next segment.